David Thompson was listed as 6'4". However, he admitted that he was only about 6'2" without shoes, but his God-given athletic ability separated him from the rest. He wasn't just relying on raw talent though, as he was extremely skilled as a scorer. He had a great handle on the ball, along with the confidence to get his shot off against anyone. But if he had a clear lane to the hoop, he could finish through contact, or he would just dunk on you. David became a star at NC State in an era where dunking wasn't allowed, so he couldn't show the full extent of his physical gifts. But he and Monte Towe would invent the alley-oop pass, as David got so high up that he could look into the rim, but he always had to lay it in, much to his frustration. David would lead NC State to a national title in 1974, as he was so highly coveted as a prospect that he was chosen #1 in both the ABA and NBA drafts. David chose to play in the ABA, becoming one of the best players in league history as a rookie, as he dazzled the fans with his monster dunks and elite scoring ability. His game only got better after the merger, as he was the best young guard in the NBA, even getting into a legendary battle with George Gervin for the scoring title in 1978. But after a foot injury, he was unable to contribute to the team, and feeling isolated and alone, he started using drugs, as his tenure with the Nuggets would come to a messy end. Once his substance abuse became public during his first season in Seattle, he focused all the negative energy on the court and became an all-star again in 1982. But the very next season, it would be all over after he fell down the stairs during a fight at a nightclub, suffering a career-ending knee injury. He would continue to struggle with his addiction for a few years after this, but he turned his life around and mentors the youth to avoid making the same mistakes he did. Although we all know that David's career was short for one reason or another, we still have to appreciate how he changed the game, as we look into the journey of the Skywalker. Welcome to PZ Hoops, and let's get down to it. David was born on July 13, 1954 in Shelby, North Carolina, the youngest of 11 children. He was born with amazing athletic ability and a 44-inch vertical leap, as he dunked for the first time as a 5'8" 8th grader. But going into Crest Senior High School as a freshman, the school had just desegregated. Even though the Supreme Court ruled it illegal in 1954, most North Carolina school districts took more than a decade to comply. But Coach Ed Pillar didn't discriminate on the basketball court, as by David's senior year, the team had 5 black starters. David was one of the best players in the state. He decided to stay close to home, committing to NC State. The Wolfpack were hit with a postseason ban in 1972 for recruiting violations, as when David was playing in a summer game with his future college teammates, the assistant coach joined their game. The NCAA declared this an illegal tryout, and the Wolfpack would be ineligible for the tournament. David immediately showed his talent when he stepped on campus, averaging 35 points on the freshman team, even turning down an invitation to try out for the 1972 U.S. Olympic team. The Wolfpack also brought in 5'7" guard Monte Towe, while 7'3" junior Tom Burleson held down the middle. David started his varsity career on fire, averaging 33 points in his first 5 games. He was the engine that powered NC State's offense, as they scored 92 points a game. The Wolfpack ran the table, going 27-0, beating the powerhouse Maryland 3 times, including in the ACC championship game. But NC State's season would end here. David had an amazing sophomore year, leading the ACC in scoring and becoming a first-team All-American, averaging 25 points and 8 rebounds on 57% shooting. The ban was lifted in 1973, as NC State was ready to compete for a national title. Monte and David worked on a play called the alley-oop pass, where he would throw the ball anywhere near the hoop, and David was able to get it and lay the ball in, with him being able to look down into the rim with how high he got. Because of Lou Alcindor's dominance at UCLA, the NCAA had banned dunking, so David couldn't finish those alley-oops the way he really wanted to. It was really frustrating having a 44-inch vertical leap and be way above the rim and not be able to dunk the ball, David later said. Kareem messed it up for everybody. He messed up all my college highlights. NC State suffered a bad loss to UCLA in the 3rd game of the season, but they didn't lose again after that, as they were 25-1 heading into the ACC championship game against Maryland. Tom dropped 38 and 13 to help them win by 3 in overtime and advance to the tournament. The Wolfpack played the hardest schedule, but they still had the 4th best offense in the nation. David led the ACC in scoring again, but he wasn't just an All-American. He was the AP Player of the Year, averaging 26 points and 8 rebounds on 55% shooting. David's first tournament game was against Marvin Barnes in Providence, but he was unstoppable, dropping 40 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 steals in an easy win. The next game against Pittsburgh was going pretty well, until David soared through the lane and blocked a shot, but he didn't hear the goaltending call. His sneaker caught one of his teammates' shoulders and he flipped in the air, coming down head first on the wooden floor. The whole arena went silent as David lay unconscious. Once he was rushed to the hospital, doctors needed 16 stitches to close a gash in his head, and he was diagnosed with a severe concussion. Much to everyone's surprise, he returned later during the game and sat on the bench, receiving a massive ovation. NC State would easily win this game and move on to face UCLA in the Final Four. the only team that had beat them in the regular season. Even with the stitches still in his head, David played 45 minutes of a double OT thriller, dropping 28 points, 10 rebounds, and 2 blocks. NC State faced Marquette in the national championship, as David had an all-around performance, with 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 steals. Tom had 7 blocks, as NC State shot 56% as a team, easily winning by double digits, as the Wolfpack were national champions. Tom left for the NBA in 1974, as David could have easily joined him, but he wanted to try and repeat. Freshman Kenny Carr joined the team, and he was the second leading scorer. David had a lot more offensive responsibility, but he was still playing like the best player in the country. He dropped 57 points and 17 rebounds against Buffalo State, 43 points against Davidson, 38 against Maryland, and 39 against Clemson. In his final home game against Charlotte, David got a breakaway and decided to dunk it, but a technical foul was called and the basket didn't count. The Wolfpack had the second best offense in the nation, but they just weren't as dominant as the year before, finishing 4th in the ACC. NC State wouldn't be able to defend their title, as they lost to North Carolina in the conference tournament. David was the AP Player of the Year again, with averages of 30 points and 8 rebounds on 55% shooting. David was the first pick of the 1975 ABA and NBA drafts, chosen by the Virginia Squires and Atlanta Hawks. David decided to play in the ABA, as the Squires traded him to the Nuggets for Matt Calvin, Mike Green, and Jan van Bredekoff. The Nuggets were already one of the best teams in the league, with Dan Issel, Bobby Jones, Ralph Simpson, and Chuck Williams in the starting lineup. David's pro debut was amazing, as he dropped 28 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, and 2 blocks. Even when he was cold, he was still effective, as on November 5th against St. Louis, he dropped 11 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, and 4 blocks. He was averaging 25 points on 52% shooting through the first half of the season, so he was recognized as an all-star. But the ABA was in trouble. The league started with 10 teams this year, but the Baltimore Claws, Utah Stars, and San Diego Sails all folded within the first month. In an unusual decision, the entire Nuggets roster were named all-stars, even the players that barely saw the court. But David would be a part of history this weekend, as he competed in the first ever slam dunk contest, finishing as a runner-up to Dr. J. Even after the break, David was on fire, dropping a season-high 50 points against the Spurs on February 17th, making 17 of his 20 shots. David was 3rd in scoring, 6th in field goal percentage, and 10th in blocks. Another interesting stat was that he finished 17th in total offensive rebounds. David and Dan formed a great scoring duo, while Bobby held it down on the defensive end, as the Nuggets finished with a league-best 16-24 record. David averaged 26 points, 6.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, and a block, as they faced the Cardinals in the semifinals. He dropped 29, 9, and 5 in Game 3, and 34, 5, and 2 in Game 5, but the series went to a Game 7. David put up 40 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals to help Denver blow out the Cardinals. They faced the Nets in what would be the last playoff series in ABA history. Although David averaged 27 points in the first 4 games, the Nuggets were down 3-1. Denver had 3 20-point scorers in Game 5, and none of them were David, but the Nuggets were able to stay alive in the series. In the last game in ABA history, David dropped 42 points and 7 rebounds on 70% shooting, but the Nets would win the series and the championship. After the season ended, David was given the Rookie of the Year award. When Alvin Adams won the NBA's Rookie of the Year award, he thanked David for not playing in the NBA. Also around this time, David was searching for something that would give him an energy boost, so he turned to cocaine. But for now, it was an occasional occurrence. The Nuggets signed a lot of NBA free agents in their first NBA season, including Matt Calvin, Ted McClain, Willie Wise, and Fatty Taylor. David continued to produce as a sophomore, averaging 28 points on 55% shooting in the month of November. He dropped a season-high 44 points along with 5 rebounds and 7 assists on March 23rd against the Spurs. David was 4th in scoring this year, making the All-NBA first team, as Dan and Bobby had all-star seasons as well. But outside of these 3, the only other double-figure scorers were Matt Calvin and Gus Gerard. Denver's game plan was to outscore their opponents, but Bobby, Dan, and Fatty Taylor all finished in the top 20 for defensive rating. This well-roundedness helped them finish at 50 and 32, as David averaged 26 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals, as they faced the Trailblazers in the semifinals. He dropped 26 in Game 1, but Denver lost by a point. He had a bad shooting night the next game, but Denver tied the series. He put up 40 points in Game 3, but they lost. Denver went down 3-1 behind another cold night from David, but he bounced back with 31 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 6 steals to keep them alive. David struggled again in Game 6, as the Blazers easily eliminated the Nuggets. Bob Wilkerson was a new starter at small forward, but the point guard position was in a state of flux, as Matt Calvin, Brian Taylor, and Jim Price were shuffled in. David was scoring like his usual self, dropping 36 in the season opener. In addition to his offense, He was having an underrated season defensively, having 8 games with at least 3 steals and 10 games with at least 3 blocks. Going into the end of the year, David and George Gervin were neck and neck for the scoring title. So in an effort to separate himself, David scored a career-high 73 points in the season finale against Detroit on 28 of 38 shooting and 17 of 20 from the foul line. But his lead was only for a moment, as George dropped 63 points to claim the crown. Denver was still elite offensively, but their defense had gotten worse. A 48-34 record was still enough for a division championship in a semifinal matchup against Milwaukee. David averaged 27 points, 5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, a steal, and a block. The Nuggets were up 3-1 in the series, but they let Milwaukee force a Game 7. David put on his cape in the series decider with 37 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, and 5 blocks to help Denver advance to the Western Conference Finals, facing the Sonics. Dennis Johnson played great defense on David, holding him to 43% shooting as Seattle won the series in 6 games. The Nuggets got better on paper in 1978, acquiring George McGinnis and Charlie Scott, but they had to give up Bobby to get George. Denver was confident that David was their franchise player, so they paid him as such, giving him a record contract extension that paid him $4 million over 5 years. Now that he was the highest paid player in the league, the pressure on him increased, but he delivered, averaging 28 points on 63% shooting in the first 5 games. He had 19 games with at least 30 points, along with a season-high 44 against Philly in the season opener. Dan and Charlie regressed a lot this year, as Larry Brown was let go after a 28-25 start, being replaced with Donnie Walsh. Denver saved their playoff hopes though, finishing 47-35, as David averaged 24 points, 3.5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and a block. Denver faced the Lakers in the first round, as he dropped 27 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 steals in the Game 1 win. He put up 29 points and 5 rebounds in Game 2, but the Nuggets lost by double digits. David dropped 28 points, 8 rebounds, and 7 assists in the series deciding Game 3, but Kareem carried with 29 points, 16 rebounds, 8 assists, and 6 blocks to help the Lakers sneak past the Nuggets with a 1-point win. Denver really hadn't changed much heading into 1979, but David's play had dropped off a bit as his efficiency was way down. He finally picked it back up in the middle of December, but he was suffering from plantar fasciitis and his season would end on January 9th. Now that he couldn't play, his drug use increased and it began to affect his outside life, as he was late to practices and team flights, while also becoming more distant with the Nuggets organization. He was already uncomfortable with the fame associated with being a star player, and now that he had all this pressure put on him, he insulated and gave in to his vices. It got to the point where his wife asked the police to arrest his dealer. The Nuggets traded George back to the Pacers for a young forward in Alex English, who really shined once he got to Denver. The team struggled without their star though, so they finished 30-52, missing the playoffs. David averaged 22 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, and a block. But all of a sudden, it seemed like the organization and the fans switched their energy towards him. Even though he was injured most of the season, team executive Carl Scheer asked David to write an apology letter to season ticket holders for a disappointing year. They even suggested that he give back some of his salary. In 1980, the Nuggets traded for defensive specialist T.R. Dunn and Kiki Vandeweghe, a rookie who refused to play for the expansion Mavs. David was having a nice comeback season, averaging 26 points in the first 2 months. He put up 21 30-point games and 4 40-point games, finishing 5th in scoring. Donnie Walsh was let go after an 11-20 start, and Doug Moe was hired. But Doug's philosophy was a fast-paced system that emphasized scoring and ignored defense, as they scored 121 points a game, but they gave up 122. David and Alex played off each other well, as they were 2 of Denver's 3 20-point scorers. However, their defense kept them from being a true contender, as they finished 37-45, missing the playoffs again. In his bounce-back season, David averaged 26 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. Although David was playing well on the court, his off-the-court life was spiraling out of control. He was displaying the same odd habits, but David wouldn't speak to anyone, and people became suspicious of his behavior. Doug Moe made an interesting change in 1981, choosing to bring David off the bench in favor of T.R. Dunn. But that's not a good sign when the league's highest-paid player is coming off the bench. He still had some good games, with 34 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and 2 blocks against the Cavs, and 41 points against the Spurs. It was pretty clear that David was dealing with something, and it also didn't help that rumors of him using drugs had been present since he entered the league. Alex and Kiki were now the new stars in Denver, as David was deep in the rotation. The Nuggets had their usual occurrence of a great offense and no defense, but their 46-36 record was enough to secure a first-round matchup with Phoenix. David had his worst season as a pro up to that point, averaging 15 points, 2.5 rebounds, and 2 assists. At 27, he should have been entering his prime, but he was now coming off the bench in the playoffs. He dropped 19 points in 27 minutes in Game 2, but Denver lost this game and the next one to be sent home early again. The relationship between David and the Nuggets couldn't be fixed at this point, and he wasn't happy coming off the bench. so he asked for a trade. But with his reputation in shambles, most teams wouldn't take a chance on him. The Nuggets finally found a taker on June 16th, as the Sonics sent Bill Hanslick in a first rounder for him. But before he was traded, the Denver Post ran a series of articles exposing his drug addiction, so now the cat was out of the bag. David joined the Seattle team that won the title just 3 years ago. He joined Gus Williams in the backcourt, but his production was never the same, averaging 15 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists in the first half of the season. Even with all his personal issues, he was still a popular player, as he was voted to the All-Star game as a starter, his first appearance since 1978. His numbers weren't that much better after the break, but he was more efficient. The Sonics weren't title contenders, but they still held their own, finishing 48-34. For his first season in Seattle, David averaged 16 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. The Sonics faced Portland in the first round, as David couldn't find his shot at all, averaging 12 points and 3.5 assists on 36% shooting, with Seattle being swept in 2 games. Even after a relatively successful season, David was still struggling with his addiction, as he missed almost all of 1984 due to being in rehab. He made his return in mid-January, coming off the bench exclusively now. He dropped 22 points in his 4th game back, and he had a 3-game stretch in February where he averaged 25 points on 64% shooting. But David really didn't look the same, as he wasn't moving like he used to, and he looked like he had lost a good amount of weight. But March 9th would be the last game of his career, as he was involved in a fight at Studio 54 in New York. But there were 2 sides to the story. The manager maintained that David was making a pass at a hat check girl, and when an employee intervened, David grabbed him, tore his shirt, and ripped the chain off his neck. David claimed that he was sucker punched. No matter who was correct, it didn't change the fact that David had fallen down the stairs, suffering a knee injury that put his career in jeopardy. His last NBA season saw him average 13 points and 2.5 rebounds. David's knee injury was more severe than originally thought, as he was cut during a Pacers tryout in 1985, after which he was arrested later that night for public intoxication. He was reportedly spending $1,000 a day on cocaine, and then he checked himself into rehab again. In 1987, he was sentenced to 6 months in jail after shoving his wife during an argument, but the words of a local pastor led to him spending time at the rehab facility instead. David would rediscover his faith and work hard to stay clean. He would play in the Legends Classic at the 1992 All-Star Weekend in Orlando, but he would tear his patellar tendon, as Norm Nixon also ruptured his quad in the same game. These 2 injuries led to the league canceling the game, but David finally received his just due, being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 1996. He completed his degree at NC State in 2003, as he also introduced Michael Jordan during his Hall of Fame induction, as Jordan often said that David inspired him as a player. David now works as a motivational speaker. David Thompson was one of the best athletes to ever step on a basketball court. Even though he was the size of a point guard, his athletic ability allowed him to compete with much taller players. He wasn't just a flashy dunker though, as he had an excellent handle on the ball, stopping on a dime for a pull-up jumper. He was elite in transition, and he could finish at the rim like no other, even if it wasn't a dunk. David was also underrated defensively, as he averaged over a block a game in 4 of his 9 seasons. He was supposed to be the man to lead the Nuggets as they merged with the NBA, and he was playing like a superstar his first 4 years, being one of the league's most popular players. But after signing a massive contract, then getting hurt the next season, the energy towards him changed, and the pressure seemed to affect him as he turned to drugs as a solace. Once he left Denver, he had a modest season compared to his early years, but he was named an all-star starter. His addiction issues would be part of his undoing, as the 80s were a rough time in his life. Thankfully, he got clean and turned his life around, and now he works to talk to kids about not making the same mistakes he did. Man, thank you guys. Really appreciate y'all for all the support, man. This David Thompson video, I've been looking to do this for a long time. His story is really interesting, man. It's super interesting because you see this guy who's really 6'2", and he's jumping with 7-footers. Never before seen athletic ability. But the fact that he wasn't just a dunker, that's the thing. He wasn't just an athlete. He used his athleticism to help him though. He was a solid defender. He was a great shot blocker. He was a good shooter. Like, he could score over people, he could get to the lane, he can slash. Like, he could do everything. Really what got me was the energy switch. You signed him to a massive contract, I understand. But then he gets hurt the next year after he signs the contract. And now all of a sudden, now you guys are questioning the contract. Now it's like, oh, you need to apologize to the season ticket holders for a disappointing year. But he was hurt. You gotta apologize to the season ticket holders. You know what? You should give some of your money back. Like, what? Like, who do these people think they are? Like, what? It seemed like David really wasn't a guy that really liked a lot of attention. A really reserved person. He didn't want all this attention on himself. The pressure was too much. The pressure being too much, also combined with him being hurt and not being able to play. I mean, he was already using at that time, but he ratcheted up his drug use, and it obviously affected his play. He really had the potential to be one of the best players ever. If he has like a 15-year career, you know, plays through the entire 80s, like, who knows how good the Nuggets would have been. Him and Alex English could have been a crazy duo. I mean, you can't take away the fact that he was one of the best athletes ever. Like one of the first highlight dunkers, like the first guy to really emphasize vertical leap. Like I'm looking at these NC State highlights, like his head is at the rim and he's just like dropping the ball in the hoop because he's so high up. Like, that's so unfair. Shout out to David Thompson. Shout out to you for getting your life together, man. I know you're probably never going to see this, but shout out to you for getting your life together. You know, because like I've had people that have dealt with drugs, man. People can say what they want, but once you're addicted to that stuff, it's so hard to get out of it because it's literally rewiring your brain. He still had a great career, regardless of all the stuff that happened. He's still a legend. Thank you. Please be safe, guys. Have a great day. Thank you for all supporting this channel, man. We're almost at 3,000 subscribers, man. I really love y'all guys, man. You guys are really supporting the mess out of these videos. Like, it's surprising me how much you guys are supporting the videos. I'm not gonna lie to you. Thank you. Please be safe. Stay on the ground. I'm out. Peace.